are you doing in my swamp?
I've seen reports that there are North Korean soldiers fighting in Ukraine, but I haven't seen any pictures or videos of said North Korean soldiers fighting. What I have seen is videos of American mercenaries fighting in Ukraine. So what's your take on there being North Korean soldiers fighting on the Russian side and on the mercenaries from America fighting over there?
Yeah, well, I'm just like you, man. I've heard a lot of reports about that, but I haven't seen the pictures of it. I have to also plead like possible ignorance that I have not been like delving deep trying to find like what is the latest cutting edge data on that topic. Maybe there's something that I'm not aware of, but I am in your same position. I've read that in the Times and the Journal lots of times, and American intelligence sources, two of them say it's true or whatever, but I have not seen actual evidence beyond that. As far as American mercenaries, yeah, from the very beginning, they brought in, essentially legionnaires from around the world. And, let me give a decent disclaimer before I talk about this part, because I know how crazy this sounds and how dumb it sounds now. It's not my fault that it does, though. Okay. There are Nazis involved in this war on the Ukrainian side, and there have been. And ever since, especially 14, but also since 22, you've had international white supremacist movements sending their worst to Ukraine to fight. Now, I'm not saying that this is in the high thousands. I think it's probably less than that. It's in the hundreds. But it represents an international national socialist movement, quite frankly. And when I say that, I don't mean that in the way that liberals and Democrats talk about American Republicans. I'm not saying that. And quite frankly, it really is like, you can't help it, right? All of us, we become desensitized to the term, blue-haired land whales, as they call them, right? These horrific, big, fat, communist lesbians with blue hair screaming that everyone is a fascist. Everyone to the right of them is a fascist. Everyone to the right of them is a neo-Nazi, Hitlerian white supremacist. And you can only have that screamed at you so many times before it is meaningless. It doesn't mean anything anymore. But then you get to actual topics where you're talking about real men who literally are this. Not like in the smear, not like in the ridiculous false accusation against anyone on the American right, but people who really are, say, for example, in America, members of the Ku Klux Klan or the Aryan Nation or the Atomwaffen Division or some of these groups. They are avowed Hitlerians. They are avowed fascists. Well, it's the same thing over there. They have people who are essentially, unlike in our history, where we fought against the Nazis in the war, there were some Ukrainians who fought with the Nazis against the other Ukrainians and even helped to implement the Holocaust during World War II. And these are the same groups that the CIA backed against the Soviet Union in the Cold War through the end of the late 50s. And then after the end of the Cold War, I'm sorry, I meant to say, did I say during the Cold War, after World War II is what I meant to say. Sorry if I misspoke about that. Then after the end of the Cold War in 89, or even before then, with Glasnost and Perestroika, the exiles started coming back and started rebuilding these fascist institutions in Ukraine, beginning in the very early 1990s. And then they got a huge boost with the George Bush's Orange Revolution of 2004, and then especially Barack Obama's Maidan Revolution of 2014. And then they went to war in the East. A lot of the military refused to fight, even switched sides when the Obama and Brennan ordered war was officially launched in April of 2014. And so they sent the Nazi militias to go and be the enforcers in the initial days of the war. And they've been part of the military machine ever since then, including they're at war to this day. They're the
You're talking about, sorry, was that what you were talking about on Dave Smith's podcast the other day when you mentioned Matt Taibbi uncovered that John Brennan pretty much started this whole thing and orchestrated it?
No, that was a different thing. That was John Brennan starting Russiagate in the end of 2015 when he set the Five Eyes to go and bump into, as they call it, all of these different Trump targets. So this is long before the Clinton plan intelligence, or the Clinton plan that came up in June and July of 16. This is the end of 15 when Brennan was kicking off Russiagate. That was Matt Taibbi on that. As far as Brennan starting the war, you can read this in Forbes from April the 14th, 2000, or the report might be from the 13th of 2014. John Brennan came to Kiev over the weekend, and the covert war has begun. And then the next day, the overt war began with airstrikes and armored divisions and the rest of it. Full-scale attack on the people of the East. And at that point, the people of the East, they had seized some government buildings. They were basically doing their own version of the Maidan. But they had committed no acts of war. And where there may have been, some Russian influence among them, still, it was, especially right after what had just happened on the Maidan, with the canceling of the elected presidency of Yanukovych and all of that, for them to just absolutely begin a war, and on Barack Obama and John Brennan's orders, is just, it's pretty inconceivable when you look at it. Although in context, what had happened was they had just lost Crimea. So now they were kind of panicked and overreacted over what was going on in the East, I think. Anyways, so these fascist groups, they're the ones who accomplished the putsch on the street on February the 21st of 2014. They're the ones who threatened to murder the president and chased him out of town.
Wow. And that's why Putin was so anti-Nazi and that kind of rhetoric leading into it, right? And that's these people are actually wearing swastikas and emblems and emblems, right? Yeah.
Yes, and look, it's not the case that this is a pure, perfect analog to Adolf Hitler and his party taking over Germany. For example, the prime ministers and the presidents have not been Nazis, right? Poroshenko was a billionaire, corrupt candy oligarch, and a corrupt businessman, but not an ideologue, and certainly not a like actual neo-fascist. I mean, only in the American New Deal sense, right? Of like mixed economies, but like not in the sense of like goose-stepping Nazism, right? Same thing, of course, obviously for his successor, Zelensky, who was Jewish. The prime ministers also, Yatsenyuk is from the Fatherland Party and is pretty right-wing, but I don't think you could call him like, actually, I take that back. I think I got a little bit about him, being a bit more of a Nazi in his younger days. But anyways, like he was more of a technocrat when he served there. He was from Yulia Tymoshenko's party, and she's an oligarch, right? The gas princess. Again, not really an ideological neo-fascist. So, but the Speaker of the Parliament was a Nazi, and the head of the National Police, and the head of the Kiev Police, and the Deputy Minister of the Interior Ministry, and like a lot of these guys who did get positions of power in the new government were Nazis, and they were the ones who launched the war. And so, it's always with the false dichotomy, right? They always go, oh, if you say it was provoked, then you're saying that it was wonderful and that Putin can do whatever he wants and you love him so much. Or if you say that there are Nazis in the government, then you're saying that Putin was justified in invading the country because the Nazi problem was so bad that he had to denazify it or whatever. But that's not what I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that, Kiev was killing people in the East. And there were absolutely neo-Nazis and neo-fascists and whatever, Banderites, as they call themselves, and others who absolutely were problematic. And especially, you might even just focus on the danger that they posed to the American-supported presidents. Poroshenko, whenever he wanted to negotiate and try to bring an end to the war, they threatened to murder him, and then he would back down. And the same thing with the new guy, Zelensky. When he came in 19, he ran on peace. He crushed Poroshenko in the election of 19, and he was supported by another oligarch named Kolomoisky. But he's a Russian-speaking Jew from the Kiev province. The Kharkiv province, I believe. So not the far east of the country, but he's not an ethnic Ukrainian or an ethnic Russian. As a Jew, he's sort of like can stand in between and possibly negotiate between the two sides. That's why he was elected, That's why people supported him, especially in the East, but also in other parts of the country. It's because they wanted him to make peace. But the thing is, and he already had a peace deal. He inherited a peace deal, the Minsk II deal, that hadn't quite been implemented yet. But when he went to try to implement it, the Nazis held these rallies. No to capitulation, they said. We'll hang you from the tree, hang you from a tree on the main drag. I always forget how to pronounce the street name in Kiev. But and this is Dmitry Yarosh and Andrew Beletsky and others. And then even Andrew Kramer at the New York Times, whenever they agree with me, the rules of confirmation bias say that they even admit that I am right. And Andrew Kramer said, look, these are credible threats. These Nazis have overthrown the government twice with a little help from their American friends, he might have mentioned, and they could do it again.
Yeah.
So, like, in other words, if some redneck neo-Nazi from Alabama says, oh, I'm going to go and get me some Joe Biden scalp. No, he's not either, right? Now, the Secret Service might not protect Trump, but any other president, you would expect the national you can't threaten the president. They will roll your ass up. You're not getting anywhere near him, right? But that's not what we're talking about here. You can't transpose your understanding of how it works in the USA with how it is over there. These Nazis are in the government. They say, listen, you don't need to worry about the Nazis anymore. You know why? Because we made their Nazi militia an official part of our National Guard, an official part of our army.
Wow.
That's why you need to not be worried about their violence any longer, right? Yeah. Can you imagine that in the United States of America? We've got a real problem with the Aryan nation. So what we're going to do is we're going to give them their own battalion.
Give them a badge. Yeah. That's crazy.
What could possibly go wrong?